Our resident lawyer, Despina Prialo, of boutique law firm Prialo Legal in Runaway Bay, with us each and every Thursday, thank goodness, to offer her legal expertise by providing some general advice on the latest hot topics. They don't come much hotter than today's topic. Of course, having experience spanning more than 25 years in the area of property and commercial law, she joins us now. Good morning to you, Despina.
Good morning, Wayne. Good morning, Brooke.
Good morning, Despina. So, as of Monday, the 11th of October, things changed quite significantly here in New South Wales because a new public health order came into effect. So, since then, there's been so many questions, people calling in with a bunch of confusion, really, even myself. So, you're coming on today to do a special double segment to pretty much explain those big changes and how it affects all of us here in New South Wales. So, where do you want to start with that giant health order?
Yes, there's a lot to cover. And the public health order, as you said, came into place on Monday, the 11th, so only, a few days ago. And there's a lot in this public health order, first of all. And as you said before, there's been a lot of confusion, and rightly so, because the public health order is many pages. Once again, it's over 50 pages. It's very detailed, and it affects every person in New South Wales, because this public health order is not restricted to any specific areas within New South Wales. It actually applies across the entire state. So that is something to be made clear first up. So it's the public health general order for COVID-19 issued as of Monday, the 11th of October, and it applies to the entire state of New South Wales. So every person listening, obviously in New South Wales, needs to really get a handle on this, because I have to say that the confusion perhaps that is occurring in New South Wales is caused really by a lack of, and I think a failure, if I can say, by the New South Wales government and other officials to properly explain the public health order that's come into place this week.
Oh, yeah, of course. And to add on to that, it was hard even to access the physical document for yourself as a lawyer.
That's right. So I found it difficult to find the public health order originally. And then, of course, once I did find it, the usual public health order that we have seen over the course of time in the last 18 months is that there are a number of provisions. You have to get your head around those. Some of them appear to be nonsensical, to be honest. And then you've got to get your head around all the definitions. So I'm hoping today, obviously, I'll do the best I can to provide this information to listeners so people understand what do they have to do from now on. Because one of the significant things that has come out of this public health order is that the burden of separating vaccinated and unvaccinated people, and whether these people and visitors can come into your place of residence, and whether they can be restricted from going into public places. The burden is on people who are occupiers of places of residence and also occupiers of businesses. So this public health order is very much about putting in place restrictions and laws about accessing public places. So that's been made very clear. But also, of course, a place of residence is considered a publicly accessible place as well. So there are provisions in there for what occurs within a place of residence, and then, of course, other public places. So I think the first thing we should do is talk about this places of residence provisions and how that applies to everybody.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, there will be obviously different households will have different sets of people within them, and then different situations within that. So there's issues, of course, around inviting people over for a party, or then for example, getting tradies in, etc. So there's a whole stack of things that your average everyday householder needs to know before they even allow anyone into their house.
Exactly, and this is all about the onus being on members of a household who are over 18 years of age. So that's first of all. So if you're over 18 years of age and you're a member of a household, a place of residence, you have the burden now to work out, if somebody turns up at your place of residence, a visitor, can that person be allowed entry into your place of residence? Okay, so we're going to go through that in a minute. A place of residence, interestingly enough, is defined as, and can include temporary accommodation. So it doesn't necessarily have to be your permanent abode. It could be also hotel, motel, and short-term accommodation.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you're staying somewhere temporarily, these laws also apply to you if you are the person occupying those premises. It's very important to understand that. So it's about working out if certain visitors can come into your place of residence. So if you have a place of residence and no member of that household is an unvaccinated adult, so everyone's vaccinated, and I'll talk about the definition of unvaccinated adult in a minute, then you must not allow a visitor who is an unvaccinated adult to gain entry into that place of residence, or you cannot allow more than 5 visitors to be in your place of residence at any one time.
Wow.
Okay, so that's number one. Now, the definition of an unvaccinated adult is a person who is more than 16 years of age who is unvaccinated. And there's, of course, a definition of what vaccination means for the purposes of this public health order, and it means that you have a double dose.
Yeah,
right?
and that is important because a lot of people think, okay, well, I've had my first one, so
I'm halfway there. It's a bit easy breezy.
Yep, but it's not.
But it's not at all.
It's not. And it talks specifically about having your vaccination certificate and your immunisation certificates as evidence. So if you want to go gain entry to certain places, you must have that on hand. And that's very important. So yes, double dose is required, not just one dose. If you have one dose, you will be considered an unvaccinated adult. Okay, so that's very clear in the public health order. So that's number one. Now, number two, if you have a place of residence and you've got members of the household themselves who are unvaccinated, then you are not allowed any visitors. Right? So there's a different categories. You've got members of a household who are over 18 who are vaccinated, and then you've got what happens if you've got members of a household who are unvaccinated. So different rules apply. Okay, so that's important to understand. And another aspect to this, person who is under 12 years of age doesn't count as a visitor. All right, so when you're working out whether this person who's turning up with a group or a family is a visitor or not, they don't count. And then you've got other provisions in here that talk about, everything I've just said doesn't apply to certain people, to certain visitors.
Of course,
Okay?
yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Yes. So when I said before, it's a little bit nonsensical.
You're right.
Exhibit A.
Yes, because the whole point of, I believe, these provisions, of course, they've put them in there to have restrictions. You cannot allow visitors into your place of residence if they're unvaccinated. And we've talked about that just before. But then it says, but doesn't apply to these categories of visitors.
And who are those lucky people?
How do you remember this? I don't get it.
Exactly.
Yes, what's the list?
Here's the list. So, and they're called authorised people. So, of course, people you've authorised to come into your place of residence, but certain categories. So, people who are there to carry out work, right? So that can be a whole range of different people. A person to assist someone moving to or from the place of residence, so removalists, for example. Someone who's there for childcare, carers' responsibilities, family contact arrangements, someone who is there because of an emergency or to avoid an injury, illness, or risk of harm, and someone who is there to inspect the place of residence because it's for sale or lease, or to participate in an auction.
Okay, so basically that list, they can come freely. You do not have to play security guard.
Exactly, yes.
But if it's visitors or if it's a party of some sort or a family, you are then policing who has been vaccinated.
Exactly. Yeah. So you have the burden to police it, to enforce it, and that's very clear in the public health order. But then, of course, we've got this other list of people, visitors we call them, who are authorised to come into your place of residence who may not be vaccinated. Okay. So, and I've just listed them. So if they fall within one of those categories, then you do not have to play policeman to say, well, are you vaccinated? So these provisions about segregating unvaccinated adults to vaccinated adults do not apply to the list of visitor categories I've just mentioned.
Oh my goodness. My brain is already fried.
I hope there's something available where you can just download. Here's your list. Stick this on the fridge or stick it at the front door, perhaps. That would be good.
Exactly right. And I don't think when this public health order was made, I don't know if there was enough thought given, if I could say, to whether it actually can apply to strata schemes in New South Wales. And there's been discussions about that recently, and there's been some thought by people in the profession that really if the intention was for it to apply to strata schemes, so, high-rise, mid-rise buildings, community living arrangements, it actually doesn't apply. And that's a very strong view, because we're talking about public places, but we're talking about places of residence.
Yeah.
So can it apply in strata schemes, for example, common property areas?
Yeah. Well, isn't that a public area? I mean,
this is the thing, is it?
Question, yeah.
Within an estate, if you've got areas that are not just easily accessible by the public, those areas wouldn't be caught.
What?
You see? So I don't think they gave that enough thought. But
No.
moving on, we have these other provisions which are very important to talk about, and that is additional restrictions placed on unvaccinated adults in New South Wales. And I'm talking specifically about premises, so public places, and we're going to go through a whole list of what is caught and what isn't, and when an occupier of a business can actually turn away people if they cannot provide that vaccination evidence I talked about before.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that very soon. We'll have a quick break. You're listening to Talking Law on Radio 97.